Well, it says live on my end.
I'm sitting there looking for the countdown. Welcome, everybody. It's two clowns in a show. No, this is the Mindstate Marketing Hour. I take all the credit. Look, whose tail is
He
in?
came back. He came back today. Look.
It's King Louis.
He heard your voice, Louis the second. He came. He heard your voice, and here he comes again.
That's excellent, Louis. So welcome to the Mindstate Marketing Hour. This is with Will Leach. I'm Steve Brown, your host that knows how to drive this, but sometimes misses the mark. Marketing the Mind States by Will Leach. He's got this book. It's a great book. I have it out. I show it. I use it all the time. One of my favorite books on marketing. It helped me really understand that people, when they're considering your product or service, they're in a state of mind. And if we can fine-tune our messaging, we can really help people feel like we understand them and help them feel safe with what we can do to support them. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to this. Will, how are you doing?
Doing well today. It is the very first day of summer break for Nick. So I just picked him up from school. We had a quick lunch and he's already done with his parents and he's on, on his bike going out around. So it's pretty cool, man. It's the very first day of summer for me anyways, because once the boy's out of school, then everything changes here in Dallas. So, but it's good, man. It's the start of a new season for us here in the Leach household.
Well, speaking of a new season, how to change your destiny using behavioral psychology. Now, what in the world does this mean to just goofy guys like me that just want to do a little bit of marketing better?
I know, this is a little bit off topic what we normally talk about, right? We usually talk about how to use these principles in business to grow businesses consistently. But, if you read the book and if you've worked with me, I always say this is a human behavioral model that we developed, and we just tend to apply it to marketing and to business. And a couple of months ago, I was asked to join this thing called the Genius Project, which I don't know why I got in there at all, but it was. But when I heard Genius, then of course I'll do that. So it was interesting enough is the person who invited me, I was out in Australia, and the person that invited me into this project for this huge 2 or 3 day summit to speak, he asked me to speak about mind states. And I said, well, and I looked at what they were talking about, it had nothing to do with marketing. And I said, I don't think we've got the right person. And he was smart enough to realize this really isn't a marketing model. It's an understanding of human behavior model. And could you just try to apply the principles of behavioral psychology to help people become better people? And you know what? You can. It's actually relatively simple if you follow some certain steps. And so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to use behavioral psychology to change your destiny, which is a big word, but really it's about meeting your goals, living your best life, all these things, because our behaviors matter to our destiny. So here we are.
So to change my destiny, so if I want to change where I'm going, I've always heard you have to change your mindset. You have to think different, Steve. That's why you got to do this. So your world. That's
right. So first off, your world out there, whether you know it or not, is determined by a large, impact, I guess, by your subconscious stories. So there's this branch in psychology called narrative psychology, and marketers have been using narrative psychology. They didn't know this, but they were using narrative psychology for the last 10 years, trying to become more emotional. Narrative psychology basically tells us that the way we interpret the world around us is in large part due to stories. So as kids, we understand through stories. We learn through stories. Every culture learns through stories. It's been like this for thousands of years. So if you understand these stories that you tell yourself, you actually make decisions based upon the stories you tell yourself. So it's really, we have this storied nature in our human behavior. So point being, if you understand the stories that you've grown up with and how those stories help shape decisions you make, the way you look at yourself, the way you look at others, that impacts your destiny. No doubt about it. Everyday decisions are based upon the stories we tell ourselves.
So can the story, I guess it can be impacted by your family.
Yep.
Your maybe something that happened to you at school or something you need.
Yep. And fairy tales.
Right.
fairy tales, movies. Like, you and I have done work with Donald Miller, right?
Yeah.
And there are particular stories that we've told for generations and generations and generations that follow certain specific plots. And so there's books like I got back here, the 7 Basic Plots. There's another book called the 20 Basic Plots. But basically, stories for generations have followed certain plots. And so when you open that book, to read to your child, Steve, or if you're out there and you read stories to your children, those plots are creating stories in their head. And so when something similar in the world happens to them, their mind looks for meaning. It's around a story that they've learned. And that story is obviously modified, like you just said, by experiences, by things, your financial situation, your environment, fairy tales, movies, music, all these things develop your own narrative psychology.
So you were in Australia and you were asked to speak at this conference to a bunch of geniuses. And so obviously they needed a genius to talk to them. So you took the concepts from your book, from your history, and you started to weave in this, you must tell yourself aspirational stories.
That's right. So in the book, we talk about, the first part of our model is understanding your customers' goals. And then if you understand their goals, you can help understand, or you can ladder those goals up to understanding people's aspirational goals. And remember, when you market to people's aspirational goals, you create focus for their attention and you create consistency. Well, what better than the stories that you tell yourself? If you tell stories around your aspirations, you will focus on your aspirations, and subconsciously you will actually make decisions that draw you closer to your aspirations. So I'll give you an example. And this is all subconscious, and I've been working on this for a while. So, and I think I may have talked about this in a previous episode, but I had a business coach who noticed that I would talk when people would ask me a little bit about myself, and I'm in a room or whatever. I would tend to use the words, "I was never supposed to be here." I was never supposed to be here, because I think of myself as, if you guys know me, I was terrible in high school. They graduated me because they just wanted me out. I went to summer school every single year. I had no college aspirations. I went into the military, and now, when I think about my life, like I live in a suburb of Dallas with a beautiful wife who adores me and a kid who's he may make it, he's going to be better off than me. But the story I've always told myself is I was never supposed to be here. I was never supposed to be here. Now, what that does is, and in many cases, I believe that's true. I was never supposed to be here, but I overcame barriers. So it sounds like an aspiration, or it sounds like an inspirational story. And it is. Except here's what that story does. One, it always places me in the underdog role, and that may be good, because that actually inspires me sometimes. Like if you think about my book, I am trying to change the way marketing is done. I'm just trying to figure out a better way of doing marketing, and I'm the underdog. I'm going and battling against 30 years of marketing, things that people have learned in their MBAs that is flat out wrong. So I'm fighting, and I'm the underdog. But look what else it does. So I'm always the underdog, but it also, because I keep telling my story about I was never supposed to be here, it also creates kind of a ceiling of where sometimes I don't believe that I'm supposed to make it ahead. I actually have inadequacy issues, right? Because I'll go, am I really a genius? Steve, even when I talked about the Genius Project, somebody out there in Australia said I was worthy of a genius. That's right. Yeah, I'm not a genius. I'm not a genius, right? So because of that story, I was never supposed to be here. That makes me cringe when somebody, says you're part of the Genius Project. And now imagine the types of decisions I've made to get serious, that I've chosen not to do something because deep down inside, I wasn't supposed to be here. I shouldn't have been on that stage, right? Imagine how many times you've chosen not to do something because of a story. It helps you take on challenges, but it also keeps you from taking on challenges. So you must understand your aspirations. And we have a process of doing that, right? We've talked about it all the time. If you don't know what your aspirations are, you have to start thinking about your life roles. So what you want to do is try to figure out your life role, meaning all the elements of your life, kind of what are the roles? And so I have 8 roles, and I've been talking about these roles. I created these roles in my life decades ago. I think it was back in the military. But
All
roles are
all 8. You ate 8 rolls at
8?
one.
No, not ROLLS, ROLES. That's right. So physical role, like I have a role for my physical body. I have a financial role to my family. I have a spiritual role in my family, right? I have a role for my spirit, my spiritual development. I have a friendship role where, I'm a friend to people. I'm a father, which I just talked about. Mm-hmm. I'm a husband. There's my 6th one. My 7th one is career, and I separate that from financial, but my career, my companies, that's a role I play for a large part of my days. And my 5th one, and I have to explain this one so you don't get angry, I call it king. So I have a king role, and my wife's like, you better not say it, you better explain it. My king role is I have to maintain my little castle here in Dallas. I got to make sure things work. I got to repair things all the time. I got issues with my plants right now. They all froze. But also, I'm also trying to make sure that the family is tight. This king role of making sure the kingdom is happy. Things are flowing in the kingdom. So it has nothing to do with me being a king and servants or anything else, everybody. But that's just what I determined it. So you have to figure out your roles. Sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's 8. I don't think you should go more than 8. But I do believe that you have to start thinking about your life more than just, myself. You got to think of the roles that really define who you are in every given day. And for me, it's those 8.
So I read the sales book, and I'm trying to think of the title of it, but it helped me understand this role that you play.
Yeah.
So you change roles during the day, but when you go home, even though you may have sucked at your job role that day, it doesn't make you overall as a person that you sucked. You just, in that particular role for that day, you might have did great or you might have done bad. Yeah. But it doesn't overall set you in. But you have to be careful or you'll let it sink in and tell your story the wrong way.
No, that's exactly right. I remember I read this ad, or it's a Facebook post or something about this guy who every day he took his hat off when he came home from work and he put it outside the home. And that was his physical trigger to say, that role is over. It's now time to focus on my other role, which was dad and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's actually an important thing. It sounds kind of hokey, but it's actually really important. That made him realize that part of the day, that role, it's over. Now it's my chance to, amplify this other role, whether it's, husband, wife, whatever it is. So no, I think it's a really important thing. Actually, you're much more than just who you are in your work.
Absolutely. So number 2, you say, find your aspirational goal for each of these life roles.
That's right. So imagine that, in the book, if you know the book, we talk about this idea of finding what's important to your customer. And then you ladder those up to understand what is their aspirational goal. You can do the exact same thing for you by life role. So for instance, you can say, okay, I'm going to look at fatherhood. That's a role I have. And you can say, what is important for me to become a great father? Just define as a great father. And you list those things out for you. Well, I got to be there for my son. I got to teach him certain values. I got to create experiences where he can learn. I mean, again, I have to discipline. There's all sorts of these things that are important to you, right? Or these things that would define you as saying, hey, I'm a pretty good father. Then what you do is you ladder those up into an aspirational vision of who that person is. So the way you do that is you say collectively, let's say you list out your 5 things. If I do these 5 things consistently, I'll be a great dad. Why is that important to you? Ask that to yourself one time and write that out on a sentence. If I collectively do those 5 things, why is that important? You write that out. Then guys, the secret is do that exact same exercise again. You take that sentence and you say, why is that important to you? And what will happen is you'll ladder this up to a more emotional place of saying, you'll get to a point where you'll say something like, well, if I do these 5 things, I will be able to make sure that my son is successfully ready for the real hard world that's going to be after him, decades from now. And why is that important? Because if he is ready for this really tough world that he's going to go into, then he can make a contribution that will benefit society. And if that is your vision of being a father, and you're saying, my job, my role as a father is to make a man, or in my case, a man, to become his very best, that he can change society for the better, that's something I'll wake up for. That's something that will get my attention and will say, you know what, it's time to spend time with my son, to teach him these things so that I know in the future, my legacy, 20, 30, 15, or 15 generations from now, hopefully my legacy will still be out there. So you got to ladder those things by each one of these life roles into this aspirational vision. And we call it in the book, aspirational goals.
So you're watching the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. I'm Steve Brown, your host. And today we're talking about how to change your destiny using behavioral psychology. So this comes from when Will went to Australia to speak to a bunch of geniuses. And so now he's delivering it to us.
That's right. To the commoners, to the non-geniuses, right? That's right. So you can have lots of goals and you can have aspirations, no doubt about it. However, we're also lazy. We get distracted in life. The world's very complex. So you must create a system to where you can fully envision these aspirational goals daily. So it's not enough for you on January 1st of every year to go, here are my aspirations and for the year, because after a couple of weeks, after a couple of days, for a lot of people, you never keep consistency, right? That's right. So you have to create a system. And if you can systematize this, you can actually create a habit. So I did this. And I've done this now for 2 decades. I learned it years and years and years ago from a Tony Robbins. I was in the military and I learned it from a Tony Robbins disc, I guess, that my roommate had. And he called it, this may have been called What Matters Most, or it may have been from Franklin Covey. They all talk about a lot of the same things. But I have a system and I've been doing this forever. So what the system does is on Sunday nights, I look at all 8 of those aspirational statements because there are different aspirations I have by role, right? So I look at all 8 of those statements and I do this thing, I call it like the wheel of life, or maybe I learned it as the wheel of life, but basically I create a circle and then I make a pie graph out of that circle. So there are 8 perfectly symmetrical pie pieces of the pie, right? And all I do is I look at that pie piece and I say, last week, how well was I able to really live out that aspirational goal that I had? Like, was I that great father? Was Nicholas further prepared in life to where he will make a positive difference on society? And I would kind of basically look at that pie and I'd make a mark. And I've done that for 2 decades now, every Sunday night. And what that does for me is it forces me to say, you know what? I've been given my body, which you probably see, well, you can't see my belly today. Sometimes I forget to work out for weeks at a time, right? It forces me every week to come to the realization that I am not focused on my physical idealized self, right? My physical aspirational goal. And then I have to go do something different about it. The second thing I do, and if you guys hear nothing from me today, it is really important to do this. And because if you read any book about what millionaires and even billionaires do every day, you will almost always see 2 principles. One is some sort of meditation, whether it's prayer or yoga or some kind of a meditative, like all billionaires and millionaires talk about these moments every day that they do. And the second thing they do is they create lists of affirmations, basically, right? Remind yourself that you are worthy, that you're good. You had a great day yesterday. Remind yourself that you built a business by yourself. Remind yourself that you come out of COVID. Remind yourself. And I know it sounds kind of goofy, and I'm that cynic that always says, oh, that's so awkward to write out a list of all these affirmations. You're good enough and you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people love you. But behavioral psychology, remember the stories that we tell ourselves, and these are subconscious. The more you create a story around you are worthy and that you have done great things, even as something as small as I was nice to the mailman, whatever those things are, list those out and read those, and you will create a new story around you are a good person. You are worthy. That's why this stuff matters. You better, the whole point of this idea is that you need to tell the right story and believe in the right story. You create belief systems by telling your mind again and again that belief is true. So go do it. Write out that list. So those are two things I do. I read this list every morning, just very quickly. I may change some things out. I may add to the list. Some things don't make any sense anymore, but I read a list of affirmations before I write any emails. It just gets me into a good state. And then every Sunday, I'm looking at that pie going, hey, this week, I've really got to focus on Father. This week, I've really got to start focusing on the business. But other times I'm like, but boy, I'm doing a great job as a husband, or I'm doing a great job spiritually, and working at the church. So that's why you do it. And ultimately, you're trying to create this psychological narrative in your mind. And when you are focused on positive things and positive momentum, you're going to have a positive destiny.
So number 4, you talk about lower your internal resistance to change. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking while you're talking, I start this out a little bit of a system, but I blow it off after a little bit. And obviously I have some internal resistance. What's my problem?
That's right. So I tell this all the time with marketers and in businesses. I'm like, understanding somebody's goals is great, and you can be motivated to reach your goals, but that is not enough. There is resistance. And the reason why is because the world's complex. We get distracted. Things are tough. It's not easy to lose 20 pounds. It's not easy to discipline your son. So what you need to do is start thinking about how do you lower resistance? So these moments where you feel like, and I look at my little pie chart, and I say to myself, golly, man, there are 2 pieces of this pie that have not moved in a long time. They don't look good. What you have to do is start asking yourself the right questions. So if you are hesitant, if you are procrastinating, it is a problem with the questions you ask yourself. So neuroscience is really clear. Psychology is very clear in this idea that if you ask your mind, or if you ask yourself a question, the human mind comes up with an answer. It always comes up with an answer. You may not be a conscious answer, but it always comes up with an answer. And sometimes the hardest part, to do is figure out the subconscious answer that your mind is trying to tell you. That's a whole other story. But what you need to start thinking about is if you are procrastinating, and for me, maybe it's the physical body. I'm not working out enough. I'm not running like I used to. I'm too stressed, whatever. You have to start thinking about asking the question, but before you ask yourself the question, go back to the book, right, Steve? Mm-hmm. And we have these 2 approaches to all of our goals, to reach our goals, right? We talk about this all the time. In the book, we call it promotion regulatory focus and prevention regulatory focus. I talk about it as being optimistic in nature or cautious in nature. Mm-hmm. So we've taught this before. You have a natural tendency to either be cautious in nature or optimistic in nature. Now, there's lots of different variables. As a father, sometimes I'm one way. As a business owner, I'm a different way. But in general, you're either oftentimes seen as more optimistic or more cautious, depending on which you are. And a lot of times it's real simple to know. Like you probably right now, if you're listening, you probably get this right now. You're like, oh, I tend to be cautious. I personally am cautious. I avoid risks in most parts of my life. That's just who I am as my personality. I've always been that way. So other people are more optimistic. Like, hey, the world is our oyster. If you just work hard enough, you can make it. More optimistic in nature. So if you find that you're procrastinating and you want to figure out how to kind of keep going after your goals, ask yourself a different question. But ask the question towards your natural approach. And there's 2 questions. If you find that you're not making progress in one of your roles and you are optimistic, you would ask yourself, how can I push through these barriers? What are the barriers out there and how can I push through? That's optimistic. How do I push through the barriers? And your mind will come up with answers and you can write those things out and you'll come up with a great solution that is motivating because it's lowering your natural resistance to change. If you are cautious like me, I ask a different question. My question is, how can I avoid pitfalls? So how can I avoid the pitfall of rather than working out in my garage, going and eating brownies in my kitchen after this show, right? How do I avoid that? For me, that's the stronger question. And if I can answer that question, well, right here's my office door. If I make a left, there's my garage. If I make a right, there's my kitchen. So what do? I avoid the pitfall. Don't make the right. Go left, right? I avoid the right. If you ask yourself that question, you'll come up with better answers that fit your natural intuitive state. Because if you go against your intuition, just like we know in copy, if you're writing copy and marketing, we know that if you go against your customer's intuition, something feels off. There's resistance to change because something just doesn't feel right. Same thing with your own behaviors. So ask yourself the right question. Either if you're optimistic, how can I push through these barriers? And if you're a little bit more cautious, how can I avoid a pitfall? And your brain will answer that question and then follow that answer.
So what do you mean by create an alter ego for yourself?
That's right. So I love. So there's a book out there, if you haven't read it, by Todd Herman. It's called The Alter Ego Effect. And I read it about a year ago, and it's brilliant in its simplicity, but it's backed on a ton of behavioral sciences. So here's this concept that we all have an alter ego. And there you go. We all have an alter ego, or we should have an alter ego, because when we just don't feel like we can do something, if we're not sure of ourselves, if we have this belief that maybe we're not good enough, well, you can sit there and try to cheer yourself up, and you can try to pump yourself up, and yeah, maybe that'll work. And a lot of times it doesn't work because ultimately you don't believe it. So what do? You create an alter ego. And it talks about in this book, I'll give you two examples, which I love in the book. One example was Kobe Bryant. So, basketball player, just got into the Hall of Fame. Kobe Bryant, he actually created the alter ego Black Mamba, because when he was going through a lot of issues in his personal life, remember there at one point he was going to be sued and he almost had a criminal case against him. What he couldn't separate his mind of what's going on in his personal life to the basketball court. So he created an alter ego, which is called Black Mamba. And Black Mamba was the guy on the court that you could not stop, right? Another guy who did this is Bo Jackson, really famous football player, right? And what Bo Jackson did was, back when he was in Alabama playing high school football, he was an incredible football player, but he kept getting into problems. He kept getting into legal problems. He'd fist fight. He'd yell at his coaches. He had no discipline. And he basically was told that you're never going to go to college and we're going to kick you out of school, basically. So as the story goes in The Alter Ego Effect is, we all know Bo Jackson as the Auburn running back that ended up playing dual sports, baseball and football. Amazing athlete, probably arguably the greatest athlete ever, arguably. And so what he talks about is, he said in the backstage of this conference, he had asked the author of this book, Todd Herman, I guess Todd had asked him, or he asked Todd, what do you do? He goes, I have this whole thing about the alter ego. And Bo Jackson said to him, Bo Jackson never played a down in football. First off, he talked about himself in third person. He goes, Bo Jackson never played a down in football. Jason Voorhees did. So if you don't remember Jason Voorhees from those Friday the 13th movies back in the 80s and the 90s that would scare us to death, Jason Voorhees was the killer. But here's what Jason Voorhees had some attributes that Bo Jackson looked at as saying, this is perfect for me, which was Jason Voorhees never showed emotion. So he wouldn't get angry, wouldn't fist fight or whatever. He never showed emotion. It was just a methodical killer in the movies. And he would never stop. Jason Voorhees never stops. So what Bo Jackson did was, he was on the football field. He created an alter ego called Jason Voorhees, and he personified that alter ego. And that kept him focused, and it gave him the belief in himself so that he could run touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. Beyonce Knowles has done it. A lot of entertainers do it. Beyonce Knowles with Sasha Fierce, that is an alter ego that she created for a better part of a decade. Why? Because she grew up in a religious household. So when she's up on stage and she's shaking everything and she's being very entertaining and seductive, that didn't feel natural for a long time. So what did she do? She created an alter ego called Sasha Fierce, until she had a belief in herself and she had the confidence in herself. She talks about this, that she has the confidence in herself to where she now doesn't go by Sasha Fierce. She is Beyonce Knowles. So alter ego effect and creating alter ego can give you confidence when otherwise you don't have confidence. And this can keep helping you go after your goals.
So by listing out those traits, we can write those down. That'll help us figure out an alter ego that we want to be. So who are you?
So I knew you were going to ask me. So look at this. If you can see me, you guys see, do you see this thing over here? This beard? People ask me what this is. I had a client ask me what this is.
You're Santa Claus?
It is not, well, it's close. It's a wizard. So the traits I have been trying to develop I used to talk about this as sage warrior, especially as it relates to my career, sage warrior. meaning I wanted to fundamentally change marketing. And to do that, you better be resistant because a lot of people are fighting for some very old concepts in marketing. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do it through knowledge and through. So I think of the wizard. And so I use Gandalf the Grey. So Gandalf from the movies, right? I think Gandalf the Grey. And so that is my alter ego. So there are times when the Genius Project comes up and I'm thinking to myself, who am I? Who am I going to be part of this thing? Well, Gandalf the Grey sounds like kind of a good genius and he's a sage warrior, right? Gandalf was just not on this throne and let everybody else do it. He's a warrior. And so I used to envision Gandalf the Grey. So find for you have to first list out those traits and then think through fiction. You can think through movies. You can think through objects. But the idea here is try to personify or characterize something that has those traits that you need for you to reach your goals. For me, it was being smart and it was being a warrior. And for me, that ended up being Gandalf. And so I can envision Gandalf and what would Gandalf do when he's when he gets an email saying, do you want to join the Genius Project? Makes me a little more confident, right? And so for me, it was Gandalf. And you got to name the alter ego. And so for me, it's Gandalf the Grey.
So how do you activate?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So how do you activate? So it's not, you can't every day wake up and go, I'm Gandalf the Grey, I'm Gandalf the Grey. Because no, you're not. Will Leach. I got a little kid. I'm not Gandalf the Grey. So what Todd Herman does is he says, you only activate that alter ego when you need it. Now, some people need it multiple times during a day. I will tell you when I need it. And it's before I go on stage. So I'm naturally a bit introverted. It's harder for me to make friends. I like smaller conversations, parties, and big stages. They take energy out of me. But I get paid to go on stage. So what I do is I'm back behind stage, and I can damn well guarantee this is what, if you ever see me on stage or just when I get onto a webinar, I do this about a minute beforehand. I literally say, trigger, trigger, trigger. I say trigger 3 times. And I actually do this. I'll tell you exactly, because he says it's not just your words, you got to use your body. So what I do is I say trigger, trigger, trigger. And for me, that is muscle memory. That is something that triggers me into Gandalf time. And I will walk on stage looking at a crowd of 1,000 people without any inhibitions. If I don't do that, I'm starting to think through, what am I saying? Are they going to like me? Whatever. But Gandalf doesn't worry about that, right? Gandalf goes out there confident. He slays dragons. That you have to trigger that. So that is mine. What he talks about in his book is maybe it's a pebble. It's something, he actually talks about something you hold or it's a mannerism. But let's say, an eraser, anything that you keep in your pocket or something you can keep on your body. And when you need that alter ego, you touch that. And if you can condition your mind that when you touch this, the alter ego comes out. For me, it's saying trigger and then pushing my hands down 3 times. You actually can personify. If you do this enough times, you can create that. You can personify your alter ego. So it's touching something. It can't just be you saying, "Come on, Will. Come on, Gandalf." You have to go through a ritual. It sounds a bit funny, but it works. And Gandalf makes good decisions for his family. Gandalf makes good decisions for his career. And ultimately, if Gandalf is making enough decisions that are positive, I can change my destiny. So that is it. Like if you can activate your alter ego when needed, you'll use that alter ego. And you'll find is just like Sasha Fierce or Beyonce Knowles. She no longer needs it. Why? Because she personifies who she wanted to be. But it's those times where you don't feel like you can be that perfect person. Go create it temporarily.
I love it. I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder, I haven't gone through that process, right?
You got to get the book.
So the first time that you started to speak, obviously you had to be human and you were a little nervous.
Yeah.
Then after you did this, did you buy it the first time? Did you really buy into it the first time?
No. Nah, because you have old stories. And my old stories was I should never been on stage. I'm not on stage. Who am I? It took a couple of years, about 3 years, actually, about 3 years. But I got better every time because you get more confident on stage. You get your own stories. You start believing yourself. But I still do it, especially the big stages. I still do it. And because I think that gets me from not sweating when I get up there because I get really nervous because I'm always self-judging myself a lot. So I still use it, but I don't have to use it every single time. I'll tell you that. I feel much more confident just walking on a stage, even without doing that, than I would have 7 years ago, for sure.
Love it.
Yep.
So we've been doing this question and answer at the end of these, and
I like these.
People are enjoying it, and we're getting some great questions. So here's the first question.
Okay.
You ready, Gandalf?
I am. Hold on. Trigger. All right, I'm ready.
All right.
Let's see.
How do you use the psychology of colors in marketing?
Wow, this is a good one. So I have a good news and bad news on this. So for those of you who don't know what color psychology is, there is this idea that colors have associations with them. So if you're in Western cultures and there's a funeral, generally you wear black. Why? Black is associated with the somberness. Black plague, black death, tuxedos are black for funerals, stuff like that. And then there's also other associations, rightfully or wrong, with weddings where the bride wears white. There are associations with purple, with royalty. And so the concept is that there are certain colors that have natural associations with them. And therefore, how can you apply those colors to create these associations? The good news is that you can be very deliberate in the use of colors to hopefully create an association between your brand and that color and whatever meaning is associated with that color. The bad news is this: cultures change dramatically, even within our United States. So for some people, green can mean wealth, and other people, green means environmentalism. So if you use green, you don't know which of these associations your clients or your customers use. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of color psychology because you can't control it. And there are tendencies that people have, like blue. It tends to be peaceful and calming. But you know what? If you are a police officer, then blue means something very different. If you grew up in a police household, blue means something different. So color psychology is an interesting topic to use. I think it can give you some benefit, but I believe personally the risk is too much to really buy into color psychology a whole lot.
Excellent. All right. So the next question, this is a popular one. So how much do market research companies charge?
Oh my gosh. Market research companies charge whatever they want to based upon a number of factors. And I like to think about the factors are who, what, when, where. So you would be charged if you're going to do marketing research on who are you trying to talk to? What are you trying to accomplish? Where are these people? When do you need to have your research results? And then the last thing on that who, what, when, where, and why, I think of why is your output. And is your output, is the marketing research going to be some data? Is it going to be some sort of report, or is it going to be some sort of consulting on the back end? And all of those 5 factors together dictate how much marketing research should cost you. It could be as cheap as nothing. You can do your own marketing research for free, all the way up to multi-million-dollar projects that big consulting companies do for companies out there. So it all depends on those 5 factors and ultimately what you do with that data.
I think you're a genius here, Will.
I was never supposed to be here, Steve.
No, we invited you. You're supposed to be here.
That's right. I gotta get that bad story.
Here, I don't even know what this is. What is ethnographic research in marketing?
Yeah. Okay. Ethnographic research is literally it's understanding of people and how they interact in their own surroundings. Surroundings, the big part of ethnographic. And so the idea is that we behave differently based upon 3 different factors: psychologically, how we're feeling, our tendencies, our habits, great. But also socially, who we're around and our environment around us. Those 3 factors. Ethnographic research takes into account those 3 factors to help you understand human behavior. And when you understand how the social structures you're in, who you're with when you make a decision, who you're around in the environment, and what the environment is, and how you're personally feeling, you can take those 3 things and you can make much better products and services, programs and marketing based upon that. So it's really the study of how people interact with others and their environment. And that's what ethnographic research is.
Excellent. We had a comment. They wish that Louis II would have to sit there and roll his eyes or acknowledge whether you're giving a good answer or not.
That would, yeah, we got to probably put it some sort of like an animatic thing up there. But yeah, I'm surprised because when he hears your voice, he loves to come up here. For you guys who haven't seen, Louis only comes into my office when he hears your voice. He hates me. He doesn't like me. But he comes up when I'm having a webinar or anything like that. When he hears other people's voices, he comes up on here. So yeah, this is the third time in the last month he's been with us, hasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think he's was voted the most popular character on this whole on the Mindstate Marketing Hour.
If only I could monetize him. He takes more money from me than I'll ever make off of him. But that's good.
Maybe I can hold him in front of the camera and just use my voice and his face. that would definitely be an improvement. The Mindstate Marketing Hour. So what's next week, Will?
Well, we always have a list of topics. I think what we're going to do here very soon, I can't remember the exact order, but very soon I'm going to do we're going to look at advertising together. And we're going to deconstruct advertising in a way that you can look at advertising through the lens of behavioral science. I think that's going to be an interesting number of talks where I teach that. And there's another one where I want to start talking a little bit about how to get advertising to go viral and what's required for advertising to go viral. And there's a lot of factors in there, but there's something really interesting on the behavioral sciences. So I'm playing around with that as well.
I love that. So this is the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. He's the author of Marketing the Mind States. And for those of you that don't know, Marketing the Mind States really opened up my mind, and it helped me understand that when people are considering your product or service, they're in a state of mind. And if you can understand that, then you can communicate more clearly. You can help them feel understood faster, and it also helps them to feel safer. So I call it how to use science to connect with your clients. And you can learn more at the mindstategroup.com. So tell us, Will, we've got a masterclass floating around here.
We do. We developed a couple of new programs to help small business owners and any kind of brand manager out there who's managing the marketing for their company, how to become a better marketer. And so we have a master class and a partnership program. And our masterclass I developed so you can do Mindstate marketing on your own. And all you do is you go through a series of videos that you can download. They're yours forever. And I teach you the concepts of Mindstate marketing in the book, but in a lot more depth than I'm able to go into a static book. So there's about 8 hours worth of content. And we actually walk you through activities so you can apply Mindstate marketing for yourself. But the program that we have, it's called the partnership program. This is actually something we do every 2 months where you work with us for 8 weeks. Every week, there's things for you to read. You watch the masterclass. You do activities with other students. You actually send me your progress, and we have office hours. And what we do is we take you from a point of not knowing anything about Mindstate marketing to every week building to where at the end of 8 weeks, you have a brand new positioning for your company. You've tweaked your products and services to match the psychological needs of your customer. We've tweaked your marketing and sales process. And lastly, we've created the mechanism by which you can do an audit on all of your customer touch points to make sure that you're properly activating on the non-conscious needs of your customer. So that is also available in our program. I think the next program starts in July. So you got the month of June to start work on it if you wanted to, start work on the masterclass and watching all these videos and reading the book. And then starting in July, there's 8 weeks of one-to-one kind of personal tutelage with me, the genius, to help you get your business kind of humming along and getting real consistent sales.
That's right. You never know who's going to be in this class. It might be a fire eater. It might be a genius. Who knows who's going to be in these classes with you?
That's right. Very much so. They're all over the world. We have students from all over the world. So hopefully, hey, if you guys are out there, you want to learn more, go to mindstategroup.com and shoot me a note and I'll tell you all about it.
All right. Excellent episode, Will. You did a great job today. The Mindstate Marketing Hour. And it's on all about Will's book, Marketing the Mind States. If you don't have this book, you're not a genius. You need to get this book. It's required reading for all geniuses. So I hurry and get this book today before someone asks you. Right. All right. Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here. See you next week.
All right. And that's a wrap.